Welcome to our class on pivot tables. Along with Power Pivot, pivot tables are the most technologically sophisticated component in Excel. It makes an excellent alternative to creating many complex formulas. Today I'm going to first start with a blank worksheet and download the Access Sales Data database into this worksheet. So I will go Data, Get External Data from Access, and then you'll need to find out where you have access. Mine is in my downloads, Sales Data, and I'm going to select Sales here. I can say OK or just double click on it, either one works. Next, instead of putting it into a table this time, I'm going to use a pivot table report, and A1 would be great, so I'll say OK. We now have all the data in our workbook, and we've set up a data connection where it will update as we need to from the database. Also, when we give somebody else our workbook, it will contain all the data that we've downloaded. Let's start by picking locations for our rows, sales date for our columns. For some, the dates may come in ungrouped, like this. If that's the case, right-click on them and say Group, and let's go for Months and say OK. If when you're trying to group items into dates and it won't group, it's usually because one of the cells is not a date. It may be a blank cell or something else mixed in with the dates. So you would go back to the underlying data and fix it. Next, I'll come down here and put, amount down into our values. Let's format this amount by right-clicking on it, and I can either format the cells that are underneath, but I'd rather format the number itself. That way when we have larger or smaller groups, that formatting will always exist for this type of data. I'll click on it and say number, and we'll take out the decimals and say OK. Now I have the numbers with commas in it, much easier to read. You can see with these three stores, we've had a total of $10,402 in sales over the months of September, October, and November. That was summed up pretty fast and nicely to begin with. Let's first start by trying to answer some questions. Hopefully this is review for you, but you can learn if you have not yet used pivot tables. When I ask a question, stop and try to solve it on your own, and then I will work with you on it. The first question is, what was the revenue for shirts in the month of November? Hopefully you've tried this. We want to look for shirts. We don't care about location, so I'm going to take location out of our rows and put in items. Now you can see that we have shirts, and for the month of November, it looks like it's $435. The next question, how many shirts were actually sold in November? The number of shirts, not the dollar amount. To get this, I would come over here, right-click, and summarize by, rather than sum, account. You can see that 12 shirts were sold. Let's try another question. How many shirts were sold in September in the San Jose store? Go ahead and try. Using pivot tables, there's lots of ways we can get at these answers. One may be to drag down location into filters and then filter for the San Jose store. And we can see shirts in September were 2. Another way would be to drag location under item here, and you'll see that under shirts, 2 shirts were sold in San Jose. There are, of course, other ways we could do it. We could drag location above item, look at San Jose, and look at shirts and see that there were 2 as well. So there's multiple ways you can get at the correct answer using pivot tables. Who were the sales rep that sold those 2 shirts in San Jose? Did you say Sean and Philip? We could just pull the sales rep over here down underneath and find out who sold each of these different items. But another way of finding out that information is just double-clicking on the value that we want to see the underlying data. So this is what the underlying database would have shown. And for those 2 items, we see they're sold by Philip and Sean. That's kind of a neat trick that allows you to get at the underlying data as well. Next, what % of its revenue over those 3 months was made in the Orem store? The answer is 32.24%. If you didn't get there, try it again. To solve this, I would pull out items, so we just have the stores represented, and then I would right-click on this, and I want to summarize by the total dollar revenue, and then again right-click and show values as a % of the row total. Notice there's a wide variety of things that we can choose here that makes it very powerful as well. You can now see it's 32.24%. Now the next question. Of the total sales of all stores for the month of September, what percentage of revenue was sold in the Provo store? The answer is 44.21%. Try it again if you need to. To get the correct answer, I'm just going to right-click and say Summarize Value as a % of the column. And there we can see that in September, Provo sold 44.21% of the sales. Let's try another question. Of all the sales reps, who sold the most and what percentage of total sales did they sell? The easiest way to answer this would be to go to Location, pull that up, and put sales reps down here. Now you can see that Jeff sold 33.72% of all the sales. What was the main contributor to Jeff's sales? I could pull item under there and just see that very quickly. Let's do that. And for Jeff, you can see very clearly that it's 27.4% were bicycles. Or we could have double-clicked on his sales and gone to the underlying database and seen what was available. Let's take out item now and go back up and look at our chart. Our next question is, of the total sales, how much less did Tim sell in November than Jeff? To answer this one, I would right-click and show values as difference from, not % difference from, but total difference from. And sales rep, let's change that sales rep to Jeff and say OK. Tim sold $2,175 less than Jeff did during the month of November. We can also use slicers. I'm going to pick out maybe item, location, and sales rep and say OK. Now with these, I can look at various aspects, such as I can say bicycles. Oh, let's change this so we don't have any calculations going on otherwise. How much was sold in bicycles? We can see that over the whole period. Or I can say bicycles in the Provo store. Maybe I want bicycles and basketballs. So I control and hit basketball as well, or battery and candy, and they're now included as well. You'll notice, because we're in the Provo store, that all the other employees that don't work in the Provo store are grayed out. Of course, we can clear the filter and all the other employees will show. Maybe we're just interested in how much Jeff sold and which items he sold. Then we would have to put items in our array. So I would come over here and include items. And we can see Jeff's items that he sold. Slicers can be a lot of fun and easy to use for filtering the results. Let me show you one more cool pivot table trick. I'm going to take sales rep and put it up above into the filters above. And you can see then all the items that Jeff sold, the dollar amounts for which months. Let me show you a cool pivot table trick. First, let's clear all of our filters. And then I'll come up here and say Analyze, Pivot Table, Options, Show Report Filter Pages. And we'll do this by sales rep. And there we have, you'll notice at the bottom, it's created a tab for every one of our employees, Bob, Dave, Jane, Jeff, Jenny, Matt, and so forth. Now it's easy to distribute those as well. Let's now open up the spreadsheet covering the materials from the book.